and welcome to This is USG, a video podcast by the universities at Shady Grove. 9 universities, 1 campus, great results. I'm Khademian, Executive Director of USG. Today, I am delighted to welcome a friend and an incredible supporter of USG over many years, who has served as Vice Chair of the USG Board of Advisors and currently co-chairs the board's Student Success Committee. In 2004, Steve Hull and his wife, Susan, made a huge splash in Montgomery County with their introduction of a new publication called Bethesda Magazine. The magazine's popularity grew quickly, and in time, they started publishing Arlington Magazine, and eventually, they also launched the online media outlet called Bethesda Beat. Now, after 17 years at the helm as editor-in-chief and publisher, Steve and Susan are moving on to a new chapter in their amazing career journey. Steve Hull, welcome to This is USG.
And thank you for that introduction and for having me on.
It's great to have you here. I wonder, Steve, if we could start at the beginning. What was your path into journalism? Tell us a little bit about, your early education days and how you found your way into journalism.
I'm one of those lucky people who from a young age knew what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to be a journalist. I was editor of my high school paper, The Megaphone, at Danbury High School in Danbury, Connecticut, and then went to the University of Connecticut where I was editor of the daily paper there. And all that came to be for 2 reasons, really. One is my father was an elected office holder in Connecticut. And so the news was just a constant presence in our life, both just talking about things going on in the state, but also, the CBS News with Walter Cronkite. We watched it every night. So it was that environment. And then it also, I was in college, started in college during Watergate. And Woodward and Bernstein inspired an entire generation of journalists, and I was one of them.
That's great. That's great. So the Megaphone, what a great name for a newspaper. Yes. What a great name. And especially for a high school newspaper, that's fantastic. Yeah. So tell us about your path to Bethesda Magazine. How did you come about founding a magazine? It's an entrepreneurial venture as well as a journalistic venture. Tell us about how you arrived at creating Bethesda Magazine.
So for the 14 years before Susan and I started the magazine, I was a senior executive at Atlantic Media, which publishes the Atlantic and National Journal, among other things. And it was a great job, especially working for the Atlantic, which, Mark Twain was one of the 3 founders of it. And wow. It was just a fantastic experience. I had a great job, well paid, but I knew in my heart that I was an entrepreneur. Excuse me, and I was in my mid-40s, and I knew it was now or never, that I was going to try going out on my own. And so I decided to do that. And then the next question is, what do you do? And what I was missing the most is, as you climb the corporate ladder in your career, each step of the way, you seem to get farther removed from actually producing anything. And in many cases, farther away from actually interacting with customers. And I really missed both producing something, as in a magazine, and having day-to-day contact with customers. So there's this scene in the movie Broadcast News where the character played by Albert Brooks, who's one of on the network news team, he chooses to go to Portland, Oregon to be an anchor. And I always think of myself as, I was at this national magazine, and then I decided I really was much better suited to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. And so for a lot of reasons, we decided a city magazine, as they're called, was the way to go. And I've been living in Chevy Chase for 15 years before that, and decided that, the best place to do this was right in my backyard.
That's great. You've had a front row seat to journalism for a long time and to politics as well. I think you worked on the Hill for a while. Your father was an elected official. Tell us a little bit your reflections of how journalism has changed or how it stayed the same. What's been constant through that? What are your observations of, the way politics are covered? We've become very digitized now, and
Yes.
Bethesda Beat is right in that sweet spot as well right now. But what changes do you see in terms of coverage and the pulse and the tone, and what do you see in terms of the steady state of journalism as well?
I think if you look at publications like The Atlantic, The New Yorker, there are still places, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, that are doing extraordinary journalism covering politics, focusing on issues, focusing on trends, focusing on solutions. I think the Post goes a little too far on, almost like sports coverage. Who's doing what to whom, and all political journalism to some degree has gone in that direction. But so much of what's online is all about that. And it's about the horse race coverage, which I love too. I love politics as sport as much as anyone. And I read all that, but I don't think it serves the interests of the voters or of the country. And I don't think it's going to be getting better anytime soon. Most voters don't read The Atlantic and The New Yorker and The New York Times and some of the really quality news outlets. They're getting their news from Facebook or other sources. And so much of that is first fake news, to coin a former president's term, but in the sense that it is literally people, and frequently in Russia, making things up. And so much of it is skewed that I think the state of journalism in general, but in particular political journalism, is in bad shape and not going to get better, sadly, anytime soon.
Yeah. But it is great to see a publication like Bethesda Magazine, where you can learn a lot about your community, take deep dives into your community. Tell us about why Montgomery County. I read in your last editorial, or your piece in the last issue of Bethesda Magazine as editor-in-chief, you wrote that in 2009, on your 5th anniversary, you recognized Montgomery County as probably the best place to live in
Yes.
America. And why? What do you see as so special about this place, and why dedicate a magazine to this place as well?
So in that 5th anniversary issue, the cover was a illustration of Montgomery County and the DC area. And we had some fun you could see the Beltway, and on the Montgomery County side, there was very little traffic. And on the Virginia side, it was just backed up all the way. Sorry, I know you used to work in Virginia, but
I used to make that trip all the time, right?
It's true. There's never traffic on the Beltway in Montgomery County. So it is. I mean, people, as I said in my last column, if you live in Boulder or Santa Barbara or La Jolla, where there's lots of amazing places around the country that, have us beat with better weather, mountains, on the ocean, whatever. But to me, what makes a place special is the people. And I just think Montgomery County is an extraordinary place for a variety of reasons when it comes to the people who are here. Partly it is people, especially in Bethesda and Chevy Chase and some of the other communities, are just leading large lives, whether it's what they're doing professionally or philanthropically, whatever it may be. They're really interesting people who are trying to make a difference in their community or in the world. And I mean, you just look at some of the people who live around here. Supreme Court justices, it's really something. But to me, the part that makes Montgomery County even more interesting, and why I loved publishing a magazine here for the last 17 years, was just how diverse a community it is. The New York Times online has a calculator where you can go in and put in the name of any county, and it will tell you how long it will take for the rest of the country, for the country at large, to catch up with that county in terms of diversity. And when you put in Montgomery County, it tells you that the United States, which is increasingly a pretty diverse place, will not catch up with Montgomery County until 2049.
Wow.
And by then, of course, Montgomery County will be even that much more diverse. According to the county, in 25 years ago, the county was 25% white and 25% people of color. Now it's about 54% people of color. And in another 25 years, it is going to be 75% people of color. And it just makes, and it's people from all over the world. And it just makes this such an interesting place to be. And it is not only accepting of that diversity, it encourages and embraces that diversity. There are exceptions, of course, as there are everywhere. There's 1.1 million people who live here. Not everyone feels that way, but in general, it is incredibly welcoming. And I think we generally celebrate that diversity.
I think you're right. And we're going to talk a little about Shady Grove, universities at Shady Grove in a minute. I want to run an idea by you, Steve. I listen to a lot of podcasts and listen to a lot of ideas and try to bank a lot of really interesting ideas to help us, solve problems here at Shady Grove as well. And I've been listening to this one podcast by Angela Ruggiero called The Fluid Fan. And she's very focused on how sports fans are changing over time. And one of the things that she notes is that research shows that sports fans are very interested in the narrative of people's lives, of teams' lives, and that traditionally sports has been reporting statistics and, kind of who won, who lost, a little bit like the horse race that you were describing. But that she notes that there's a real interest among the future fan in these narratives, in these stories that give more meaning, that give more insight, more depth. And I think this is something that good journalism does. It gives us a narrative about our lives, about our community. It's not just statistics, but it's also what binds us together, what connects us, what we value. I'm wondering what you think about that. Is that a role that you see for journalism? Is that kind of storytelling about our lives?
It is certainly the role I see for what we do. One of my best friends, John Rawlings, for 14 years was in the 80s and 90s, was the editor of the Sporting News. And the Sporting News used to be the Bible of sports. And but the thing that people loved in the Sporting News was that you got baseball box scores there. Well, now you can get baseball box scores online with 100 different metrics, statistical metrics, so you don't need that anymore. And so the good sports sections at the New York Times in particular, I would say, have utterly reinvented themselves because now they have to tell the narratives. And I mean, that's what I love about what we do, and why when we sold the business, it's something Susan and I very much wanted to do. One of the things that's hard to step away from is I love the fact that Bethesda Beat reports the news, the breaking news, usually 8 stories a day, whereas Bethesda Magazine, which comes out 6 times a year, does in-depth stories. We did a 12,000 word story once on a single elementary school, and which is the elementary school we chose was because the diversity there and how it is the reflection of what's going on elsewhere in the county. But I think for people to really appreciate what's going on in the community and in their lives, for them to, for the news to be relatable, you need to tell narratives, and narratives which rely heavily on people. And so you can really get to know the people involved. And I think the New Yorker in particular does that just brilliantly. We try to be the New Yorker. We're not exactly the New Yorker, but we try. We aspire. And I think that is the most effective form of journalism, is that kind of narrative storytelling, to give perspective, to give context. And the problem is it's also a commitment as a reader, because we don't usually do 12,000 word stories, but we routinely do 4,000 or 5,000 word stories, because we think to tell that story adequately, we need to dedicate that many words. There's not that many people in this day and age, with everything happening online, that are willing to make that kind of commitment. I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and I was sitting in the waiting room, and I was watching the people. They during the pandemic, nobody had magazines out, but now they were back out. But not a single person was reading a magazine. They were all on their phones.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, I enjoy Bethesda Magazine, and I will tell you the latest issue that lifted up and focused on women leaders and women in business was wonderful, absolutely terrific. And the fact that you are celebrating women leaders is one important story to tell, and the diversity of the women and the diversity of their careers as well. Just is a very important story. It's a very important message to convey, and so I'm really grateful to you for the work that you and Susan have done over these years, and the great narratives you share with all of us, and that gives meaning to our lives. It's really important. So
the headline I put on my last column was "The Honor of a Lifetime," and indeed, that's what it was for me.
Well, you are a dedicated member of the Shady Grove Universities at Shady Grove community, serving on our board, vice chair at one point as well, and now serving on the student success committee. And I know how much time and energy you give to the students at the universities at Shady Grove, and to all of us trying to serve the students as well. What brought you to Shady Grove? You have, from where you sit, I know you're very involved in many social service, many areas of volunteerism that you give your time and leadership and vision. What brought you to Shady Grove? What was it that convinced you that the universities at Shady Grove is a place to invest a lot of your time and energy?
A few things, and I do serve on several boards and love doing that on each of the boards. But the difference with Shady Grove is that most boards, you don't interact a lot with the people you're serving. At universities at Shady Grove, we get to interact with the students constantly. And it is, say this about USG a lot, that it's big enough that it matters and small enough that you can really get to know people. And it's a community. There's a real sense of community. And it's just so satisfying and so inspiring to be able to interact with the students. And in some cases, hopefully make a small difference in their lives. I mentor several students a year, as do many board members. And I tell them all the time that they're the ones who inspire me. They say that having a mentor inspires them. I say, no, it's the other way around, that they inspire me.
Yeah, we have really remarkable students here. I find that, we have many, the term used in education is non-traditional students. So they're not, they oftentimes work part-time or full-time. They are parents, they're living with family, supporting family, they're paying for their own education.
Yes.
So going away for 4 years and living on campus is just not an option. So a lot of focus and determination, a lot of, they know what they want out of their education, and are very successful when they graduate as well. So
yes. And what we have, is it the highest transfer graduation rate in the
it's among the highest.
Yes.
It's among the highest in the
our
system.
students don't have the choice to just, I did the 5.5-year plan at the University of Connecticut, much to my parents' dismay. Our students, for the most part, don't have that choice. And one of the things I've learned in mentoring over the last 7 years, maybe 12 or 13 students, is many of them have come through lives of trauma. And many are immigrants who had very difficult times in their journey to here. I mentored a student whose father had abandoned her and his mother was murdered. And how they are able to overcome the obstacles in their lives and both be getting their degree with incredible focus, but also their degree of optimism and their hopefulness about the future. It is, as I said, it's just so inspiring.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. Well, we are in the midst of a strategic plan here at Shady Grove, as you know, and we're referring to our future as USG 2.0. How do we build a more sustainable USG? How do we double the number of students that we serve? How do we continue to serve non-traditional students, transfer students in a really thoughtful and equitable way, and still grow and reach more students in the county. What are some things that stand out for you, Steve? You know, from where you sit, what are some things that we need to be sure to preserve going forward? And what are some of the things that you think we might need to change going forward in terms of a strategic plan?
Yes. So I think, I mean, the demographic trends in the county almost ensure that there's going to be even greater demand for USG, which isn't to say that all immigrant students are going to want to come to USG or need to come to USG or anything like that. But the reality is that many of the future students, for either financial reasons, cultural reasons, family reasons, are going to want to stay close to home to get their education. And the Montgomery College USG pipeline is and pathway is really an extraordinary thing. So I think the future in that sense is really bright for USG, and future being bright mostly in terms of our ability to serve even more students, which is the whole reason we're all so committed. Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of where do we go from here, without going into the details of, we have to figure out a stable and sustainable financial model. There's so many internal kinds of things within the system that need to be fixed. But being involved with the students as much as I am, being the co-chair with Dan Cochran of the Student Success Committee, my focus tends to be on the students. And I know this is your focus too, that because so many of them are non-traditional, because so many of them come from families that have not, we have many who will be the first in their family to graduate. And because many of our students have been through trauma, the need for services beyond the classroom, that need is great and is only going to grow. And it is, given the budget, freezes and things and cuts, it makes it harder and harder to provide the services, both in terms of their wellness, but also in terms of career counseling and the like, and arranging for internships. We need to step in, the University of Shady Grove needs to step in to do that. Everyone is committed to doing that. It's just the state needs to provide the resources so we can do that well.
Yeah, a lot of work to do, and a lot of support that's needed to make sure that everyone can succeed as well. Absolutely.
Yes. One of the frustrating things for me, having been on the board for 7 years, and I know for a whole lot of other people, we have had really great people, including Steve Simon and staff, working to make people more aware in the community about USG. And it's hard to do. It's not the easiest thing to explain. I talked to a high school counselor 6 months ago about something to do with the magazine. And I just, at the end of the conversation, I said, let me ask you a question. Just where are you, familiar are you with USG? And she had only, and this is a high school counselor in Montgomery County who's advising students on where they should think about going to college. She had only a vague awareness of it. And so I think there's been great work that's been done and is being done. That is just critical. And there's one of the challenges that there's just so many constituencies we need to inform about USG. And it is a challenge because sometimes the messaging often the messaging is different from one to the other. And so, it is not an easy thing.
Yeah, getting the word out about this unique educational institution is a challenge.
Yes.
But I think the stronger we build pathways into USG, the more clarity students have about the pathway into USG, the stronger our partnerships are with Montgomery College, with Frederick Community College, with Howard Community College, and with MCPS. I think that awareness will grow. We'll get there. I hope we will get there.
Yeah, I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I am too. Steve, let me ask you a closing question for your reflections. kind of going back to journalism again and thinking about the state of our democracy.
Mhm.
We've come through a very contentious election cycle. I'm sure there are many contentious election cycles ahead of us. Contentiousness is not new, but maybe some of the misinformation in the process is more new. You're at the intersection of journalism with a distinguished and impactful career across journalism, all different kinds of publications, and you're also at right there with education at the universities at Shady Grove. What do you see as the challenges ahead in terms of, building stronger communities, making democracy work? What role does journalism have to play, and what role
Yeah.
does education have to play? Are they similar?
Yes. So let me just cite, as you did, a podcast that I have started listening to. And it's got an interesting name, History That Doesn't Suck. Yes.
I've heard of it. I've
Yes.
heard of it.
It
Yeah.
is. I am now obsessed with it. And there's, I think, 90 something episodes. Each is an hour.
Wow.
And I decided to do Reconstruction, the 4 episodes on Reconstruction first, for about an hour each, and by a professor who's both incredibly informed, but also articulate and fun. And in listening to this, I realized that, what we're going through now, which is because of online communications and social media, is different in some ways, but there have been many times in our history when elections have been contested where people refuse to accept the results, and it's just they didn't have the microphone that people have now to shout out that false message. Mm-hmm. I think for all the faults of journalism, I think journalism now for our democracy, whatever level it's at, is more important than ever, because there's so much false information out there, because there's so many voters who are, called low information voters, who just, are easily persuaded. I think getting the truth, getting, honest reporting out there is one of the keys to righting, the ship of our democracy. But I will stress that I think that's the case on all levels, because of what's going on in the economy, because of I think 80% of all online ad dollars go to Google and Facebook, and there's very little left over for local media. There's been literally hundreds of local news outlets that are closing, newspapers and there's now these what are called news deserts everywhere. And it is one of the things, even though Bethesda Beat for 7 years lost money, there was no chance we weren't going to continue, that we were going to stop doing it, because even Montgomery County had before, Bethesda Beat was becoming a news desert. And, informed citizens, engaged citizens are the ones who will make, doesn't have to be, not everyone has to agree, but they should be making informed decisions. I'll just finish with, we did a voter's guide last year for what we would call the midterm elections in the county. And we got 175,000 page views on it. So literally tens of thousands of people read the voter's guide, which just, was inspiring to us. But we need to have that kind of information available, in every community.
Absolutely. What a good note to end on. Steve, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for all you've done for Bethesda, for the Montgomery County with Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat, and Arlington as well with Arlington Magazine. And thank you for your service on the USG Board of Advisors. It's a pleasure and honor to work with you.
No, it is my pleasure. And I think I can speak for every board member just how excited we are that you're now at the helm.
Thank you so much.